Hello, I'm Bill, and in today's video I am going to talk about why we social distance 6 feet and why it's important. Specifically, I'm going to talk about respiratory droplets, respiratory dispersions, and respiratory clouds in the context of social distancing. So why is this all important? So I threw out a lot of words here. The main point is social distancing, we do that to limit exposure to respiratory droplets. That's the short answer. And then let's dive into the more expanded version. Okay, so respiratory droplets, they're moisture that's created whenever I exhale or have a respiratory event. Okay, so whenever I'm talking, I'm generating respiratory droplets. Singing, laughing, coughing, sneezing are all respiratory events. So sneezing is a highly visible respiratory event because you can actually see the moisture because the droplets could be so large. But normally they are microscopic. So when I'm coughing or when I am just talking right now. A good way to visualize this is imagine that it's a winter day and you're, say, someplace cold like Massachusetts and Boston, and you're going for a walk and you breathe and you can see your breath, and that's because the respiratory droplets are actually being condensed by the cold air. So imagine that, because you can see it, that's actually happening all the time whether we can see it or not. So those are respiratory dispersions. Okay, so those respiratory droplets are being dispersed constantly. So as I'm talking right now, respiratory droplets, microscopic, it's being dispersed. Okay. Now, when I sneeze, same thing, but it's highly visible because you can see the droplets because they're so large. So that's a respiratory droplet. Again, is the moisture that we create whenever we exhale and any type of exhalation, if you will. Okay. Now, a respiratory dispersion is when exactly what it sounds like. It's when your respiratory droplets are being dispersed. And so the way we try to limit that dispersions is to say when you're ill, like if you had the cold, okay, or the flu or whatever, and you sneeze, and we're told to sneeze into our elbow or shoulder or into a tissue, and the reason behind that is to minimize the dispersion. Okay, so I want to repeat that, to minimize the dispersion. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it, right? So we're sneezing, or we're covering our mouths whenever we sneeze because it limits the dispersion. So by limiting the dispersion, you minimize the number of germ containing droplets that are spread. Okay, that's why we do it, and that actually directly leads to social distancing. And because whenever we have these respiratory events, we are creating this cloud. Okay, as we're creating this cloud potentially 6 feet. So respiratory droplets can travel 6 feet or more under normal conditions, environmental conditions, or normal weather conditions, whatever you want to call them. But under normal conditions, they can travel up 6 feet or a little bit more. Okay, and when I say normal conditions, let me use an example. So if I were to sneeze, right, and I'm here in Metro DC under normal conditions, it's spring, and I sneeze, the idea is that it can travel up to 6 feet. Or 6 feet, we're a little bit over 6 feet, etc. Okay? In normal conditions, there's no wind or anything like that. Now let's imagine that I was in the desert. Let's pick one. You can pick the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and if I sneeze there, the respiratory droplets can't travel as far because of environmental conditions, because it's really, really hot, and the rate of evaporation is a lot higher here in the Gobi Desert than here in springtime DC. So hopefully that's clear. So environmental conditions does impact the rate of evaporation, and then how long the respiratory droplets stay in the air. So in buildings with like AC or whatever, there's a potential that cloud that you generate, the respiratory cloud now, because as you're constantly exhaling, let's say if you're ill, you're constantly coughing, now you're creating this respiratory cloud. Okay, and it could potentially linger in a confined space. In the open air, you're fine, but in a confined space, it could potentially linger. Okay, and that's where we get into the 6 social distancing, and actually also our PPE. Okay, so that was a respiratory event on cue. Okay, so So that was, I just coughed, and that was a respiratory event. And what happened was I tried to contain it, so that's, you didn't hear me cough loudly. I'm actually kind of glad that it happened. But so that's a respiratory event, and the exposure would be minimized if I was to wear a face covering. Because if imagine when I was coughing, if I coughed into this, it's being trapped or blocked or minimized. That dispersion is being minimized by this PPE. I created this face shell to go over existing PPE. But anyway, that's another video. So when I cough, I'm really protecting other people by wearing one of these. Okay, because one, it minimizes the number of respiratory droplets that are dispersed. So it's reducing the respiratory dispersion and thereby reducing a potential respiratory cloud if I was in a confined space. Okay, hopefully that's clear. So we have respiratory droplet, respiratory dispersion. So respiratory droplet is the means by which these viruses, these germs travel, but they do evaporate, and there's a distance that they travel, and then the container, the droplet, is evaporated, and the viruses or the germs fall. Okay, and then there's the dispersion. Is how widely it's dispersed. These respiratory events are dispersed. These droplets are dispersed. Is dependent on what we do to minimize it. So if I cough into here or sneeze into here, it's minimized. If I'm wearing a face mask, it's trapped or it's minimized. And the same thing, and then the cloud thereby is minimized as well. That's created. So that's the reason behind why we wear face masks, face coverings. It's really about protecting other people, and the social distancing, because the length or the distance that these that our respiratory droplets can travel under normal conditions is about 6 feet or so. But again, I just want to preface it by saying that the environmental factors can change things, of course. Okay, so that's why we social distance. It's really about it's protecting each other. And so, you know, if I was here and you were there, and we both had respiratory events, and let's say we're 6 feet apart, the idea behind it is that actually, let me just use the masks. So hypothetically, it's 6 feet apart. The idea behind it is that that if I were to sneeze over here, it would just travel and miss me. Okay, and then and likewise, it's over here. Now, if I had the mask on and I was sneezing, it actually came and traveled the whole 6 feet because it's being blocked by this. So that's the reason behind wearing these masks, is to protect other people. Why we social distance, and then like the transmittal of the virus. Let's say if it does get into contact with something, wash your hands. That also minimizes the transmission because of cross-contamination. So let's say I sneeze on this cup, and someone goes and picks it up, and then they rub their eyes, they rub their nose, they touch their mouth, and the virus doesn't have any legs. But let's say afterwards, like I eat something and I'm wiping my mouth, so it gets into my body. So if I rub my eye, it gets into my body. So that's why it's really important to wash your hands, keep good hygiene for yourself, protecting yourself as well as others. And so that's it. Hopefully that was clear. If it wasn't, feel free to send me some notes, some questions, some comments. Happy to answer them. But the big idea behind social distancing is really to keep away from those respiratory events, and then the same thing behind wearing these masks is to minimize these respiratory dispersions as well as reducing the clouds. Okay. Now there are instances where people are protected by it as well. So because if I were to sneeze and land here, it's being blocked. Okay. So that's another way that a face mask could potentially help you as well. All right. Well, thank you, and be safe.